All right, welcome back to Beyond the Red and Blues. I'm Tyler. This is Zach. Zach, what we got this week?
We are going to go over studying after you get off training. You studied your butt off all training. Now you're at the point where you have a good basis of understanding of most of the laws, most of the policies, most of the case law, and all the basics that you need to go out and do your job. Still got to keep up to date on everything. Laws start changing, policies change, new case laws post every year, and so on. So you got to make sure to keep yourself fresh. Now there's no one to stand over you and make you go do it. So you got to do all this on your own.
Yeah, I think there's a huge difference. Oh, not difference, but you have to keep up to date, like you said, both on your department policies, because your department's going to change a little bit on how they do things. You know, people get promoted to chief or leadership position, so everyone's got a little bit different of a style and things that they want to change. So you have to keep up to date on that of what your employer wants, but then also the state laws, whatever gets passed there. And then if there's anything federal, which I don't think we've had any like big Supreme Court decisions in a while that I can remember. Certainly nothing like like a landmark case like a Terry, Ohio, or Tennessee Gardner, something like that level. I think has been quite a while, but it never stops. You always have to keep learning, and if you're stagnant, you're going to get left behind, and you're going to honestly that could get you in trouble too. If you end up doing something that used to be legal, but now it's not, and that there's a big difference there, and you don't want to get jammed up.
Yeah, it happens a lot where the vehicle code changes even. So we had that recently where a change to the expired registration was made. So like expired registration was one of those things that all of us used pretty regularly to conduct routine traffic stops. And so like with that change, it shifted to where now you can't take law enforcement action if it's only expired by 1 day, which is what we used to do. Now it's got to be expired by like 2 months or 3 months, whatever it is. Granted, this is just for California, but these changes come right now. We're looking at some of our city municipal codes are changing. And in this year of 2025, a new set of case laws posted that all came down throughout the courts in California. So again, not federal, nationwide case law, but case laws that were tried in California and are going to be held to standards here. So it is important that whenever an email goes out or something goes out about these changes, that you look into it and read the different bills or the changes by the city, whatever it may be, so you're current. Because like I said, with the expired reg, like if we still go out and we make stops on that, then that vehicle code is no longer valid, and that could invalidate a lot of your traffic stops.
Right. Then anything you do after that, they could throw out. And I know some states, you mentioned California. I know some states, they took away all equipment violations as a reason for law enforcement to stop you. So that could be a tail light or a license plate light or whatever. That's no longer enough. You can't stop a car just for that. You have to do like a moving violation or something else. So those change from time to time, year to year. And, sometimes there'll be a change to go one way, and then you'll see 5, 10, 20 years later, it changes back. It reverts back to the way it was. Even at the Supreme Court level, sometimes that happens. Or sometimes they take on a similar case, and it's a little bit more niche, and then they kind of either clarify the previous ruling, or sometimes they just overturn it completely. And I think they do that with a lot of different things, not just law enforcement.
So whenever you make an arrest, one thing that I hop on as a training officer is read the penal code. If you're not familiar with all of the elements of every crime, you should be reading them either on the way to a call, just before, or if at some point you do make an arrest, read it and familiarize yourself with all the elements. Make sure that you check all those boxes. Okay, were all the elements met? Did I ask all the questions that are pertinent to this crime? And with that being said, now I should have enough probable cause to make this actual arrest. So always read them. You should be constantly familiarizing yourself with the various laws, even on like the small ones that you're going to arrest for constantly, like battery or domestic violence, or, some of these really common ones. Even if you've read it 50 times, still pull it up, still look at it. Sometimes we're tired, we work long shifts, whatever it may be. This may have just been one of those shift killers, and we've been there for hours. Just read it again, double check everything. Sometimes you forget and you need to refresh yourself. So constantly read the penal code, especially because laws do change, and sometimes they add or reword just a word or two, and it changes the meaning of things. So make sure you're constantly looking at those and refreshing.
Yeah, let me run you guys through a quick scenario. This is a real situation that happened. There were two women at a yard sale. They both see a dress they like at the same time. They both go to reach for it. They grab either side. They're arguing. I want it. I know I want it. I had it first. They end up tearing the dress. So, say like you're the officer responding to that. Do you have a crime? Is that a crime there? And it's going to vary on the state. But I would say most, if not all states, that wouldn't escalate to a criminal level. It would be a civil issue because the part that's missing, those elements you were talking about, is that they didn't intend to do that. There was no malicious intent behind it. And every state's going to have it worded a little differently in their penal code. But you need to know that, in your head when you're going to that, because you never know. Every day is different. Every call is different. You never know what you're going to get. And so, yeah, you absolutely have to have it, I would say, memorized, at least the top 100, crimes or so.
Yeah, almost all of them are going to have some sort of like a willful and malicious element. They willfully and maliciously did X, Y, or Z. And now, like, even though it's easy to skim past these, like willful is now an element, maliciously is now an element. And so kind of like when we go to that situation, now we have to gauge, like, was this done with that ill intention or not, right? Another good way to keep yourself current, and kind of like we talked about last week, now that you're solo or maybe now with a partner, just pitching different scenarios. And a lot of these can spark through conversations of critical incidents that happen around the country. So, every week, every month, they constantly happen. There's some critical incident somewhere, in America. Granted, they're usually little snippets of clips, but eventually the whole clips come out, and then it should be something that you constantly watch and look at and go like, what could I have done better? Did the officer do the best thing in this, particular case? Is this legal what he did? Is this not? And just kind of break down each scenario, whether it's by yourself or with some of your partners, and kind of try to learn something from each critical incident. Granted, a lot of them are going to be shootings or like, greater levels of use of force, and that's why they're going to come to limelight. But try to constantly find these incidents, or even in just watching on social media, like some of these interactions with First Amendment auditors or whatever it may be, and try to figure out like, how would I handle this? Maybe even look into things like how this was handled in New Jersey is going to be different than how we would handle it here. And you should familiarize yourself with the laws here, so that way when it does happen, because all these things do happen, then you know how to handle it head on.
Yeah, and there's so many times running through my head of, what crime do I have here? Or do I even have a crime at all? It's tough sometimes to figure it out in the moment. I've even had, federal crimes. Those I don't, deal with too often. I think I only had one or two ever where I had to charge someone with a federal crime. But that one I'd have to look up. I'm not well versed. That was mostly state level stuff that we were dealing with. Some like city stuff, city ordinances or whatnot. But yeah, you always have to stay up to date, and knowledge is power. It's as simple as that.
And if you're wondering, like, where do we study? There's plenty of different places. Just try Googling things. You'll find stuff. If not, talk to your partners, figure out, where do you get your information? Every state, again, is a little different. I try to find something more universal, but there isn't a whole lot universally. But there are different websites that offer free trainings. Some you pay for. Hopefully your department may reimburse you or not. But a lot of this training you have to seek out on your own. So figure out, like, again, there's these websites. You can go look. They offer training. Some of them are certified. Even if they're not, you're probably still going to learn something, ideally. So seek out the training on your own. If not, there are some things like the legal source book, which again varies by state. This one is going to be, it only covers a handful of states, but the legal source book is one of those things that covers anything from penal codes to various case laws. And then there are other things that you can look at. Like for us, we have what's called Cal Crim, and that is basically jury instructions for the court systems. So they provide basically a printout to a juror of, let's say, battery, and they're like, this is the crime, this is the elements of the crime, and this is what you as a juror are looking for. So it's broken down into very simple terms for jurors to look at, like, okay, did they willfully and unlawfully use some sort of force or violence against another person, right? And then it'll even explain to you, like, what is a use of force? What is violence? What is unlawful in this case? And then it'll kind of give you like a quick breakdown of each element. So that way you can look at them and go, okay, this is kind of what those general things mean. And in some penal codes, it actually will just define terms like that for you. And so it'll be able to provide you with that. And then you'll be able to look at it and go, okay, this is what unlawful is, right? It's not where it's self-defense or something of that nature.
Every word is going to matter. And as a police officer, you need to know that. You need to know it at that level, word by word. What does it mean? Because you got to be thinking 10 steps ahead. In the courtroom, you're testifying, you're on the stand, and you got to explain why you arrested someone and remove them from society. So all those words will matter, and you need to know how it's been decided in court, how it's been defined. It's really important. You need to know that stuff. If you don't, at worst, best, it would be, maybe the case just gets tossed and the criminal walks, which sucks. Other things, if you're not keeping up to date, you could be sued. I think a lot of people don't know that cops can be sued personally for their actions. And absolute worst, you could be arrested. You could be the one in handcuffs, going to jail and defending, yourself in criminal court. So it happens all the time. You won't hear about it on the news too much. They don't really talk about it too much, it seems, unless it's like a really, really big case, but it definitely happens. It's frequent, I would almost say, that cops are getting sued or even arrested. You got to know what you're doing. Absolutely.
That leads us into, hopefully you're going to continue to study. Realize at some point, if you want to be a training officer or move up on the department, that knowledge will be tested at some point, whether it's by your peers, whether it's by a trainee that you get, or maybe you promote to sergeant and now it's going to be through your, whoever you supervise. So you are going to have to keep studying. I did find that, like, once I became a training officer, then I started studying way, way more than I ever did as, just a regular officer. So you are going to get challenged at some point. It is obviously better to get ahead, the earlier. And the reason why it's so important is because if you don't study, then you're not going to know exactly what you can do in as many scenarios as possible, right? Knowledge is king for just about everything. And if you don't know what you can do, then it often leads to a lot of hesitation or uncertainty. And you're going to start freezing. You're going to have arguments in the public where you sound like those officers on social media where somebody defies your orders or tells you, I don't have to do that. And then the argument just goes back and forth. Yes, you do. No, I don't. Yes, you do. No, I don't. Whereas if you know and you're positive, like, yes, I can do this. This is what I'm going to do. And you make that very clear right out the gate. And if there's still that defiance, then you should know right away, okay, I can do it. And I'm just going to do it, right? There used to be this saying that we used to have, granted, it's moved away now, but it was ask them, then tell them, then make them, right? But you can't get...
depends on the state.
Of course.
I think some rural red states will be more, lenient towards that. And then other states are going to be, forget, that's ways of decades ago.
I get it, but you're never going to get to that make them part if you don't know if you can make them, right? It's like the Pennsylvania versus Mims, like, get out of the car. No, I don't have to. Yes, you do. But I don't know why, right? Versus, like, I know it. I know the case law. I know what I can do. It's tried and true. Get out. No, I'm telling you to get out. No. And now we can just make it, right? Maybe there's policies in between that you have to follow, request a supervisor, backup, whatever it may be. But at the end of the day, we're going to get to that make it part. So it is important that you know exactly what you can do. So that way, when you do encounter these challenges or, some sort of defiance, that this is exactly what I can do, right? Use of force is a big one. Like, do you know your rules of use of force, both on a policy level and, it is state regulated in terms of what you can do power wise. So if you don't know, then you may end up using too much force, or you may hesitate and not use enough force. And then it just looks uglier and uglier the longer it goes on. So it is important. Study. It is king, and it's going to lead you to much, much smoother encounters.
Who knows what cops can do and can't do? Only second to cops is career criminals. I've been challenged so many times. No, you can't do that. You're not allowed to. You can't touch me. They're going to challenge you, and you need to know better than them. And sometimes they're right. Sometimes they know, like, nope, you can't do that. And I know because of whatever. And I'm like, really? Okay. Didn't think you'd know that case law from 35 years ago. But you don't tell them that, but you're like, okay, because they've learned over the years. They watch, they learn, and they're studying too. Especially if they're in prison, they got nothing but time, a lot of time. So yeah, definitely you need to know what you can and can't do, and you need to know in the moment. Like if it's 110 degrees out and the guy's wearing a hoodie like Zach is here and he's digging in his waistband, that doesn't make any sense, right? That's not reasonable. He should be wearing that. He's not listening to you. You need to know what you can and can't do. And the split second of him pulling that gun or not might make the difference between your safety or your partner's safety. You can't be like, oh, I'm thinking, what was that, Kate? No, you need to know it like by heart, like quickly.
Yeah. And one thing that I remember is with my first training officer, 10 years on already, probably knew everything, was one of those guys that made me just learn everything. I knew how to do other people's jobs at this point, right? Like all these other clerks and all these things behind the scenes that other people didn't have to do, I had to do. He was just one of those guys. I remember just thinking and clowning him all the time because if we had any downtime, he would just sit and read policy. And it like baffled me because I was like, nobody does this. You see all these other people, literally nobody does it. But 10 years on, still just sitting there all day, anytime we had downtime, just reading policy, reading anything to improve his knowledge on the job.
Well, yeah, the book's about that
Oh,
thick,
it's huge, right?
and it's small print.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's just so much to learn, and a lot of it is, very niche and not that relevant, except for, in 1% of the times, and even then, it changes. So, maybe it is worth doing, maybe it's not, but at the very minimum, you should know enough to get you through a whole array of different calls. Like I said, if you see anything online, you should know already, like, these are the elements of that crime that he's detaining him for, arresting him for, and this is how I would have handled it. This is what the policy lets me do. Even 10 years on, it doesn't matter. Keep going, right? If he has 10 years and I have 1 month, like how is that okay for me to not be studying, right? So whether you just got off patrol training or you have a couple years under your belt, it doesn't really matter. There's always more to learn. There's always something that changed. So keep constantly refreshing yourself. Make sure that you stay up to date, be the best cop you can.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. And even like technological stuff changes too. Computer. I remember when we got body cameras. You got to learn. How does it record? How to mount it correctly. So you got a good picture when people go to view it, or how to upload. That whole software. You have to learn all that too. You got to learn it and make sure. I remember we had an issue with the mount, and when guys were getting into fights, sometimes it was popping off. So they had to change up the plastic and how it was mounted to the shirt. So like stuff like that, everybody's learning, and you can't be left behind. Now, what do we got for next week?
Next week, we're going to start going over duty belt gear, kind of what the average everyday person carries. I guess things and preferences that we have in terms of like flashlights, batons, whatever you can swap out, then maybe we've tried and already found something that we like.
Right. Yeah. Oh, I got a few things to say on that for next week.
Perfect.
Cool. All right, guys. Cool. We'll see you next Friday.